Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, where we talk about all the intricacies of the commercial fishing lifestyle because it is so nuanced, it is so unique, and it is so full and rich and full of adventure. And only a handful of people really understand what this is like in the entire world, which is really freaking cool. And we are a part of that community. Thank you for being here. And if you're new here, I'm Megan Waldrop. I'm so happy you decided to spend some time with us today, especially because we are diving into some real life challenges of commercial fishing. And the guest today is a wonderful human woman who is really working hard to make sure that we are tackling the issues at hand and making sure that our fishermen are safe both physically and mentally. Mandy Roome is a research scientist at the Northeast Center for Occupational Health and Safety in agriculture, forestry, and fishing. Agriculture. Did I say that right? Based in Cooperstown, New York. Mandy has dedicated her career to protecting the physical and mental well-being of those who risk it all on the water. Those are our loved ones. From life jacket testing, fatigue, and PTSD research to addressing mental health and healthcare access, Mandy's work is not only vital, it's game-changing. And in this episode, we get into the mental health challenges that commercial fishermen face, how they are screening for them, and how some programs out there, like dockside health visits in Maine, are already making a difference. This episode is packed with insights, resources, and heart, and whether you're a partner or a fisherman or someone who cares about the resilient coastal communities, this one's for you. Let's dive in. There's one subject that we're constantly talking about, whether on the podcast or in our Partners of Commercial Fishermen community, and that is safety. And here's a hard truth. Did you know 8 out of 10 fishermen lost at sea weren't wearing a PFD? It's time to change that. At Kent Safety Products, they make life-saving gear designed for real fishermen. No bulk, no hassle. Just protection that works when you need it most. They also have the most Coast Guard-approved PFDs on the market. So whether you're fishing in hot or cold environments, a fisherman can find one to fit their needs. And partners, let's just pause for a moment and think about how much it would ease stress to know that your fisherman is protected each time they go to sea. It's a lovely thought, right? And as a side note, we only partner with companies that have heart, those who truly want the best for our fishing communities and have high quality products. That's why I am proud to have Kent Safety Products as a sponsor. Visit kentsafetyproducts.com and find the right PFD for you and your fishermen. That's kentsafetyproducts.com. I'm Megan Waldrop, host of the Partners of Commercial Fishermen podcast, an extension of an online community for partners to connect and feel less alone. Our podcast invites fishermen, family, friends, and supporters of the industry to learn, laugh, vent, and hear stories about this incredibly unique way of life. What do you say? Let's dive in. Hey, Mandy, I love seeing you again. It was really eye-opening the first time that we chatted. I took a lot of notes and it really made me feel more comfortable and more knowledgeable, knowing how many people out there are really looking after our fishing communities and want to know how to better our wellness overall. And I love that we're going to talk about that today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Tell us what you do and who you work for, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Dr. Mandy Roome. I'm a research scientist at the Northeast Center for Occupational Health and Safety. So we work with fishermen, loggers, and farmers from Maine down to West Virginia. And we're just working on health and safety projects trying to make their lives easier. Occupational health and safety, people often think regulation, but we don't have anything to do with regulation. We're just trying to make life easier, healthier and safer for our fishermen, our loggers, and our farmers.
Got it. Thank you for explaining that.
Of course.
And so could you also tell us about how you got into focusing on safety and mental health for commercial fishermen specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm relatively new to the field. I started in 2019. So NEC, where I work, was working on a PFD project. So we were trying to find workable, comfortable life jackets for lobstermen specifically in the Northeast. And we went port to port along the coast of Maine and Massachusetts, with 12 different models, which fishermen had kind of tried out, given us feedback. So some of them we just chucked out because they hated them. But then we realized it's very personal preference. There's not one life jacket for every lobsterman. So we had 12 that were pretty favorable. So we went up and down the coast, port to port, offering them at a 50% discount for them. Um, so they were able to kind of just come off the boat and try it on. So we did a whole try before you buy. So that way they could see, what works, what doesn't. And then we could have that conversation with them. The neck feels tight on this one. Like it's going to chafe my neck after 16 hours on the boat. Okay, this one's wider. Try this one. What works with this, what doesn't. So it was really great. And then from that, we've done some other projects. This life jacket project has transitioned to fishing partnership in Massachusetts. So they've taken it over. They're also recreating it in the Pacific Northwest, which is awesome. And we've done some other studies. We did a sleep deprivation study. Fishermen kind of noted concerns about cognitive health kind of in the future due to sleep deprivation while fishing. So we wanted to look into that, how does sleep affect health? So we really focused on the 6 pillars of brain health to see, okay, you don't have so much control over your sleep while you're fishing. You have to do what you have to do. So what about these other 5 pillars of brain health? How can you kind of make small changes in those to make sure that you're kind of trying to negate the negative effects of sleep deprivation? And in that, we did a PTSD screener, post-traumatic stress disorder, and we weren't expecting much from it, but surprisingly, we did find that about 12% of male fishermen screened positive. The screener is for probable PTSD. So about 12% of them screened positive, and the national average for men is 4%. So that's triple. So that really caught our eye when we did that. So that's when we kind of started to dive into mental health. It's a very dangerous industry. A lot of fishermen experience trauma. And, what resources do we have for them? What resources can we create? What resources can we find that are already created that can help them?
Absolutely. You hit on so many points. Excuse me. You hit on so many points that make me think about my own personal experience with both of these instances. The sleep deprivation, for example. I'll make it a quick story, but my husband and I, we lived on a sailboat and we sailed down to Mexico. And it was like a 2-year period that we were sailing, other than when he would go to Alaska to go fish in the summertime. And at one point we hit an insane wind. It wasn't a storm as much as it was the most insane wind that I've ever been in part of. And it was 48 hours of this incessant wind. And we got to a point in Baja where we couldn't go through this little strait because it was getting dark and it was really close to the land and then the island, and we could hit rocks. So we weren't sure what to do. And it was too late to pull over to one of the harbors on the island to the right of us. So the decision was made to sail around the other island. And we were thinking maybe this would help block the wind. It did not. It was hell on earth. It was like,
No.
I was just, it was to the point where the boat was cavitating and we would sail down these waves and the rudder was coming out of the water and cavitating. I could hear it just grinding in the air. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like what is happening? Finally get through this after 48 hours. And I just look at Chris and we're sitting in the cabin and he goes, I'm really sorry. He's like, I was just exhausted and I made a bad decision. And this happens sometimes in Alaska. And I was like, what? First of all,
Yeah.
all of our lives are in danger, but he did the best that he could, but he was exhausted. Like we had barely slept because we were rotating, managing, sailing the boat, together. We'd do one on, one off. It became 1 hour on, 1 hour off for each of us. So we were barely napping for more than 20 minutes at a time, maybe. But it was so gnarly. So whenever he said, this sometimes happens in Alaska, that stuck with me, and that was the second or maybe the second or third year we were together. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is a real problem. I mean, fishermen all over the place are doing this, and who knows what kind of conditions they're dealing with. So that really hit home was the sleep deprivation and also the PTSD. So I'm so curious about the screening because I feel like this would be really helpful for partners as well, because I feel And I don't want to use this term loosely because I feel like the word, I have ADD or I have PTSD can be used very casually when it's an actual very serious mental condition.
Right.
But the PTSD, so for example, partners, myself included, we worry about their safety, number one, always. Like that's number one concern. And then it even carries on to our daily life when they're back on land. For example, when they're flying home, the fear could even be escalated even more. When it's like, okay, we made it through the fishing season. Are they going to make it home alive on the airplane? Or even for
Right.
me, last summer, he went to the store and I started to spiral. And I'm like, is he going to be okay? What if there's a car crash? It's like this kind of
Right.
default mode of having
Yeah.
this worry and this fear. And I'm
Mhm.
wondering, I don't know if that qualifies as PTSD, but I know that partners out there definitely have this residual tension and this fear when it comes to their fisherman's life. And so I'm really curious about the screening. Like, what are the screens? Like, what does that look like?
So the screening, it's a 5 question screener. So they fill it out themselves, especially because it's something so personal. We give them their space to do it. If they want to talk about experiences they've had, we are absolutely there to listen, but by no means are we going to try to get somebody to talk about their trauma that doesn't want to. Um, so there's one yes or no question at the top. What we would love to do is to do a validation study on this screener because it's meant for the general population. So the first question is, something along the lines of have you experienced a trauma? And they kind of give examples like, a house fire, a serious car accident, losing someone to suicide or something traumatic like that. But what we would love to do is to change that question to make it more fishing specific. Have you ever experienced a fall overboard, seen someone fall overboard, a traumatic injury, a vessel disaster, things like that? So that's the first yes, no question. So if they answer yes to that, then there are 5 more questions at the end, and they sort of ask about symptoms. Do you have nightmares about the event? Do you try to avoid, triggering things to think about that event? So if they answer 3 out of 5 of those questions with a yes, then it is probable PTSD. It's not a diagnosis, but it is probable PTSD, which should be followed up by a clinical interview by a clinician to determine if PTSD is diagnosed. So for our study, we didn't do those follow-up interviews. So we have the probable diagnoses, not definitive ones. But it was interesting how open fishermen were about the experiences they had. We very much wanted to give them their privacy, never wanted them to feel like they needed to talk about it. But a lot of them did. Some of them didn't want to. One had told us, I can't open that door because once I do, I can't close it. So some of them like to just sort of push it aside, and kind of not think about it. Some of them, everybody has different coping mechanisms. We had one fisherman tell us, you know, like my wife is my person. I talk to her about everything. But then we have had other fishermen say, the boat drama stays on the boat. Like I talk about that with my crew and that's it. My home drama is at home. My wife and I talk about that, but I don't mix the two. So I think and that's another thing with resources for fishermen. There is no one blanket for anybody really. There is no one mental health support system that's going to work for everybody. So what we're trying to do is figure out what does work for fishermen and what the options are and be able to get those resources to them.
Absolutely. That's so great. And I immediately think as well, when it comes to coping mechanisms, they talk about substance abuse. Are they open about what, is this assisting into their alcoholism or drug use? Because I know that's, not only is it because of getting an injury that they're starting to maybe become people in general, become addicted to the medicine and the relief, but also being able to protect yourself from those triggers. And so you do go deep into the alcohol and drugs. And I've definitely been there and I've talked about it too. And I'm wondering, is there any kind of discussion around substance abuse when you guys are talking about this as well?
So yes, we have talked about substance use. I think fishermen are probably a little less open about that. We've had some talk to us about substance use. But generally in the questions that we've asked, we ask about how many drinks you typically have in a week. We ask about illicit drug use, overuse of prescription drugs, and things like that. But overwhelmingly, very low concern there, which doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There's a lot of stigma surrounding that as well. So it's certainly not an issue I want to downplay. Fishing Partnership, they have a really great program. Deb Kelsey runs a Narcan training program. So have you heard about that?
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. I got to meet with them. Actually, I mentioned you and spoke with Deb during one of their webinar meetings or one of their internal meetings. It was so great to hear about
Mhm.
all the stuff that they're doing behind the scenes. It's
Yeah,
incredible.
they're an amazing organization.
But the Narcan training, huge. And the numbers, I won't share their numbers, but just from when they started their studies and their trainings to now, I mean, the percentages increases of people feeling like it's actually helping. And
Yeah.
actually the increase of actually using the Narcan for their on board
Yes.
was in really, really surprising as well.
Yep.
And yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and becoming like first responders.
right,
If you have an overdose and you're out, it's going to take the Coast Guard a while to get there. So, and I know there was an instance of that. It was a father and son on the boat, and the son overdosed, and he made a mayday call. And there luckily was a boat nearby that had gone through Deb's training. So they had Narcan. So they were able to get there, and he's fine, which
oh
is
wow,
amazing, which it could have been very different.
right,
They had to wait for the Coast Guard to get out, and nothing against the Coast Guard. It just, when you're
right.
out at sea, it takes time to get to you.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Thank you for bringing that up for sure. And so we mentioned before we were talking about how some fishermen hesitate to get involved in safety studies. And what do you think is behind that reluctance?
So I think from what we've heard, there's a lot of fear that some of these studies are going to result in increased regulations. And fishermen, they've got regulations coming from every angle at them.
Right.
So especially, with this sleep deprivation study, we did, because research is always voluntary, of course. So we did have several fishermen decline because they said, I don't want this to result in us having to work fewer hours. Because especially like scallopers, they go out for maybe 2 weeks at a time, and they typically work 18 hours on, 6 hours off. So they're sleep deprived, but they're going to be out longer, make less money because they're going to have to pay for more fuel costs, more food, all of that stuff if they're out longer. So they're like, it sucks. I'm sleep deprived, but I don't want that to change because I want to get home. I want to get home to my family or just be home in general. So some of them were really worried that regulations were going to result from this. And unfortunately, it's not, we don't do anything with regulation, and we don't want to. We're here for fishermen. We're trying to make their lives easier. Our job is not regulation. But however, when we publish results, we can't promise how they're used after that. So somebody could pick it up and say, hey, we need to kind of change these regulations, have them work fewer hours. We saw this in the farming industry a year ago or 2 years ago in New York. They kind of implemented this overtime policy, which farmers didn't want because the farmers couldn't pay for the increased costs with overtime, and the workers wanted more hours to work more to have more money. But by paying the overtime, they had to stop at 40 hours. So this, and I think one of your other questions had brought it up, how do you advocate for fishermen? And I think the most important thing is, especially if you have a voice, I think fishermen, especially in these meetings about regulations and things like that, you know, they're listened to, but maybe not heard so much. And I think they feel that a lot. So for folks that want to advocate on behalf of fishermen, just make sure you're voicing the voice that fishermen want, not the voice that you think they should want. I think that's the most important thing, especially if you have a louder voice, if you have more connections and you can get more people to hear you, that's awesome. Use that voice, but just make sure you are representing fishermen in a way that they want to be represented.
Mhm. Absolutely. Amen to that. I love this. Okay. So we were talking about sharing the data. Do you lead with the conversation? Hi, we're not here to create more regulations. We'd love to. How do you start that conversation with fishermen who might be reluctant?
So generally our most successful recruiting is just right at the docks, getting involved in the communities, like kind of becoming a familiar face and just kind of starting casual conversations. Generally we don't start with that we are not doing regulation. A lot of times when we say occupational health and safety, we kind of get a look and then we say we're not OSHA. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then we kind of start the conversation. And what we try to work on is are there issues that fishermen bring up to us. They say, sleep deprivation is an issue here. Um, you know, Life jackets are so uncomfortable. Things like that. So what we want to do is work on things that are important to them. And we always have advisory boards with fishermen on them so that they can sort of guide. Because it doesn't matter how long I work with fishermen, everybody else that's worked with fishermen, it doesn't make us fishermen. They're the experts. We're good at doing these safety and health studies, but we're not fishermen. They're always going to be the experts in that realm. So we always want things led by them. And that also sort of keeps us in check to make sure that it's the voice of the fisherman that's being heard, not our voices.
Yes, absolutely. Love that. And just as a backup, I'm going to say OSHA is OSHA, and it means Occupational Safety and Health Administration. It's a federal agency. So
Yes.
we have so many acronyms. I just
Oh
want to
yeah,
make,
we
I think
do.
we throw them around. So I wanted to throw that out for people who did not know. And honestly, I'm still learning all of these. So
Me
this is
too.
still new for me too. Okay, good. That's good to know, even a pro. So, okay, let's go back to sleep deprivation
Mhm.
and fatigue. We understand why these are such big issues. How can fishermen negate this or better support themselves in a time period when they feel like they're getting less, they're having less opportunity to sleep or rest?
So kind of focusing on because you have like the six pillars of brain health.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure if you don't have good control over one, sleep, then kind of focusing on the other five, what can you do to kind of make those better? So physical activity is one of them, like general health, physical activity, mental health is one of them. Mental and physical health, we talk about them separately, but they are so intertwined. Um, they really hinge on one another. There's also diet, and that's another thing that fishermen talk about. You know, at home, my diet's okay, but on the boat, it's really not. So, kind of working on small changes in diet, because again, you can't, bring a 5-course meal on the boat. It's never going to work. But, what are better choices that you can make instead of grabbing a bag of chips? Can you grab a bag of nuts or something like that? So just kind of like small things like that to change. And also kind of healthy coping mechanisms for stress. It's a high stress environment. It's a dangerous industry. So whether things may result in PTSD or not, everybody's going to experience stress at some point. So kind of dealing with those emotions, working through them, and not having them impact your physical health in the long run is also very helpful. Because I know the fishermen were very concerned about like dementia or Alzheimer's later in life because of the sleep deprivation while they fish. So again, focusing on those other pillars of health, and also, trying your best, when you can sleep, don't have lights around, like don't scroll on your phone. That's never good before you sleep. Um, Earplugs, although I'm not sure how successful they would be on a boat. But different things like that, just trying to make your sleep as good as you can. And then also caffeinating, that's a big one. Fishermen rely on caffeine a lot because they work crazy hours. So energy drinks are generally not that good for you. Some are better than others for sure, but generally your body can't absorb more than like 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine at a time. The rest of it's just wasted. But the energy drinks, the Department of Defense has actually done some studies where energy drinks are actually neurotoxic. So they actually start killing off brain cells. So kind of more natural forms of caffeine are better. And again, the high caffeine content doesn't necessarily translate to more energy. And also the natural forms of caffeine, you're not going to have that high and then crash when that caffeine's done. So we're trying to, because Red Bull, I know Red Bull is a big one, at least in the Northeast, with fishermen. So we're trying to see if there are other things that they feel work for them, that taste okay.
Right.
Although I'm not sure how good Red Bull tastes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, not a, I think I had, last time I had Red Bull was in college, and it was the disgusting way where you put a Jaeger shot in it, Jaeger
Yeah.
bomb. I'm like, that is the worst way to inject, well, alcohol in general. I'm like, what in the heck? Anyway, no judgment to others, just saying, yeah, I've been there, done that. As you know, safety is one of our biggest concerns as partners of commercial fishermen. So if you or someone you know has been injured while working on the fishing vessel, you don't have to navigate it alone. Do you know your rights and what happens after an injury? Would you like proactive legal education before issues arise? Need expert guidance before making decisions that could impact your case? Attorney Michael Flynn has been fighting for injured fishermen for decades. And as a side note, we only partner with sponsors who genuinely care about commercial fishing families, which is why I'm proud to introduce Michael as a sponsor of the POCF community. You can contact him today for a consultation at flynnworkus.com. That's FLYNNWIRKUS.com. And tell him that the Partners of Commercial Fishermen sent you. I like that point about being able to make healthy choices in the moment to think about the future, even though I know that fishermen are like exhausted and the last thing they're thinking about is, oh, they want to grab what's out there, which makes me think captains and partners of captains who are stocking the boat, provisioning the boat, just making healthier choices for your crew. So they are able to have that option when they're out there, haven't docked the boat in weeks, months, and are able to have that. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's funny because it's like, these are basic ideas that maybe some of us, we know, most of us do know this, but it's nice to hear it over and over again to be like, oh yeah, we just change our snacks, the availability of certain things to make our bodies function in the long term. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Wanted to go back. I'm like jumping all over the place, but
No
there's
worries.
so much great information. You mentioned Fishing Partnership is taking over the study for the PFDs. And there was another study or another project happening out in the Pacific Northwest. Who is doing that? Is that associated with Fishing Partnership, or is that another organization?
It's another organization, but they are kind of partnering with Fishing Partnership. So Fishing Partnership took ours. They have some other life jackets. They were able to expand it to life jackets for fishermen, not just lobstermen, which is awesome. So they have a bunch of different life jackets, and they tie it into their safety trainings. So when they do a safety training, they have a PFD component. They have their rack where everybody can try them, and they offer them at a 50% to 100% discount. So fishermen can try them on, and right in the moment, they say, hey, if you want one, you can have one now. They can either do a mail-in 50% rebate, but Fishing Partnership has been doing a lot of giveaways, which is awesome. And then our sister center, I guess you could call it, another ag fishing and forestry center out in the Pacific Northwest, Panache. They have been doing it. They're also doing life jackets for fishermen, not specific to one fishery. And they have been tying it in with like fishing community events. So they kind of have their like some community event for fishermen, and they'll go, and I believe what they're doing is a $20 donation for life jackets. And I know the Kent Rogue 2 is very, very popular in the Pacific Northwest. They love that one. And we love Kent. They worked so well with us on the PFD project. Len has been incredible.
Absolutely. Love Len. I was also talking to Len about you on our interview recently. It was 2 weeks ago. It was during Boat Safety Week. And we talked all about the Kent safety products and their different gear. And yeah, the Rogue vests, like we really appreciate them. And it was really nice to hear all of just the research, but also the technology and also the consciousness of the environment. They also have a recycling element to their gear, like creating more gear. And it was just it made me feel better because I've realized, okay, there are other options out there. fishermen are just able to find what fits their body type. It's not necessarily for, obviously one size fits all, but also realizing, oh yeah, what you're wearing in Alaska is not what you're going to wear in the Gulf Coast.
Right.
It's totally different environments.
Hmm.
But yes, speaking with Len and Kent Safety Products, we love them. Thank you for mentioning that because they are one of our sponsors, and I'm so honored to work with them because they truly do care and want
Thank
to
you.
create the best products out there and the most Coast Guard approved products on the market, which is even better.
Yep,
Love it,
absolutely.
love it. So first of all, it's fishingpartnership.org. If anybody's interested, you could reach out there and talk to them about these programs and I'm sure, and also for their Pacific Northwest counterpart. And the panache, how do you spell that? Like if people wanted to look that up.
It's PNASH. It's the Pacific Northwest Agricultural Safety and Health Center.
Got it. Okay, great. Thank you. So if anybody wants to look that up, there you go. Even better. Okay, so wondering, okay, healthcare for fishermen. We know it's tough to schedule appointments, and when you're working with such an intense environment that, the weather's on, the weather's off, you don't know when you're going to see them even at home as a partner, let alone how are
Yeah.
we going to squeeze in these doctor's appointments. So, in your opinion, how do we make healthcare more accessible for fishermen?
So, I mean, I have a bunch of ideas. Some of them I think are pipe dreams.
Bring it on.
There, I think being more flexible with fishermen because, in New York, we have had terrible weather for weeks. So, if this were a coastal community, they haven't been able to go fishing for quite a while. And then, Friday comes up and it's beautiful. You're not going to go to that appointment and waste that day of fishing if you haven't gone out all week or for 2 weeks or something like that. So, kind of being more flexible with their schedules would be great. Some offices do charge, they'll still charge the copay, even if you like a no-show copay. So, kind of being more lenient with that, because I think that also then becomes a turnoff for fishermen because it's really hard for them, especially, how far out you have to book medical appointments. You can't say what's going to happen 5 months from now when you have that appointment. So, it kind of deters fishermen from coming back once that happens to them once or twice or three times. So, kind of being more flexible with that. And then also, and I know it's hard. Healthcare workers are very busy. They work super hard. This is not to knock healthcare workers at all, but if some offices could do like one night a week or something where it's late hours, where fishermen could make an appointment at 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. I think that would be helpful for a lot, especially like the day fishermen, because they start super early in the morning and they'd be back by that time, exhausted, but back. So kind of something like that would really be useful. And I think I might be jumping ahead. This might be one of your later questions, but the UK, they have this fabulous program. It's called CFIT. So they actually have a program where they have these dockside clinics. They have a mobile clinic and they go dock to dock. They have mental health screenings, they have dental, and they have like general health. And they pull their van up to the docks. So as soon as fishermen get off the boat, they can just walk in and see the providers that they need. So that one I think is a pipe dream that requires a lot of funding. But I mean, what a difference it has made in the UK. And that something like that would be incredible because it's one less step that they need to do. A lot of them told us on the PFD project, Hamilton Marine is a half mile from the dock, but they're like, we're not going to stop. Like, we're not going to take that trip and do it. But the fact that the van was sitting right there on the dock, they're like, oh, it's right here. Why not? So I could see something very similar happening with medical care. It's right here. I don't have to make an appointment. I don't have to drive out of my way or kind of add something else. It's just right there and convenient. So, pipe dream of mine, that would be wonderful.
I love that. That is the answer, to have a mobile office to come to.
Mhm.
And, America, we are so much bigger than the UK. It's
Yes.
like, and we get in every port. It's like, yeah, that sounds great. How many ports do we have? I don't even know how many ports we have. I mean,
A
that's
lot.
actually good. That would be a good trivia question.
Yeah.
And so, as we talked about, if funding's getting cut for certain safety trainings, what can families or partners do to help negate that? Like, what can we do on our home front to help protect our fishermen in that way?
I think reaching out to local legislators, because really those are the voices being listened to by the administration that really directs these funds. I think the more that legislators hear from their constituents, the more they realize, how important certain things are to their constituents. So that can certainly always help, making your voice heard for sure.
Okay, great. And that's actually a great point. I'm putting in, we have a private community called the Lighthouse, and it's a private forum just built for our website, just for the partners with monthly resources every month. And the one that's coming up is letter templates to write to your
Oh,
officials and your
perfect.
legislature. Yes. So it'll be y'all can just plug and play, send it out,
Yep.
and constantly building a list of contacts too that people can reach out to in their different areas.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, so that's a great point. Thank you for that. I just made another note to make sure that gets up there. And so, okay. So when it comes to building stronger and safer communities for commercial fishermen, what advice, like what's one piece of advice you give to those who are working to do that, aside from writing letters, but what can we physically do to help our coastal communities?
I mean, I think especially if somebody, I guess it's different, if you're speaking kind of to partners of fishermen versus people that are maybe not in coastal communities. So the folks that are not in the coastal communities, like our organization, we're out of Cooperstown, New York. So we're not right on the coast. We're not in any fishing communities. But anytime we start a project, what we want to do is really get the community to know us. So I think, you know, unfortunately, fishermen have definitely been burned before. So, you have groups because they have groups coming in to work with them as fishermen. They have groups coming in to work with marine resources. They've got all different researchers coming in to do different things. And I think they have been burned before, where regulation has come that's really not been favorable to them at all. They've taken part in research studies where no tangible changes or any information has come back to them. So, you're only going to do that so many times until you're like, me participating in this doesn't do anything. So, getting to know the community, I think, is the most important step to working in a community. Um, Making sure that you become a trusted organization within the community. So a lot of times, we'll start with local organizations and we also go down on the docks, but the local organizations, so I'm sure folks have come to you before and you obviously you're married to a fisherman and the fishermen are important to you. So what you're going to do is, vet those people before you're just like, hey, welcome to the community because you're a trusted person within your fishing community. So kind of the people from away from the non-coastal communities, make sure you introduce yourself to the community, make sure you become a trusted person in the community. Other organizations, make sure you vet people coming in to make sure that they really do have fishermen's best interest in mind. And I think partners can do the same. They always tell us if you want to get to fishermen, talk to their wives. So kind of just making sure that they are trusted. So people coming to work with fishermen take the time to be trusted. And then everybody else, you can ask questions. That's part of research. Everybody's allowed to ask questions back, and that's completely fair. And if people don't like questions, then maybe they're not doing the best research.
Absolutely. And yes, if you want to get to fishermen, talk to their wives. That is so
Yep.
true. Yep. Because I learned that the stat from speaking with you and other people in the space that is here to help and support our fishing communities is that the number one reason fishermen wear safety gear is because their partners tell them to. And the number two reason is because their kids want them to. So it's the huge influence that we have.
Oh
But I
yeah.
feel like, sometimes we can feel that you know, we can feel like maybe we don't have as much influence because it can feel like a foreign world. I remember when I first started dating my husband, I didn't even want to get involved with commercial fishing. I almost resented it because it was so foreign to me and I didn't understand anything that him and his friends or his family were talking about. He's from a family of fishermen
Mhm.
and it just got to me. I was like, I just don't want to get involved. And then, of course, and here we are, partners of commercial fishermen. Like, it's funny how that happens. I mean, even on any kind of level, you start dating a fisherman and then you're helping them in the yard, then you're helping them cut bait, or you're tying buoys, and then you're provisioning for the boat. You're making food for the boat. I know a partner who makes 100 burritos, 25 casseroles, ships and so much more, and ships it to Alaska. So, I mean, we get involved in ways that other relationships just do not. But I feel that to be able to honor and realize like we do have so much value. It's not just what we physically can do and our mental support systems for fishermen, but we have the biggest influence of anyone in the commercial fishing industry. It's
Right.
us, and we can learn how to speak with gentle, encouraging words from the heart and really get those messages across to our fishermen, because that's where it starts. And, I feel like obviously I'm biased, but I also feel that we are the gateway for so much, not just partners, but the fishermen. We are this original OG out there stewards of the ocean. We are out there every day. Our fishermen have so much knowledge that it's just the wisdom that fishermen collect naturally, and how they can just speak about the ocean and the currents and how the sea life changes, and the sea state is just so poetic and beautiful. And it comes from their heart, it comes from their gut, it comes from their blood. I mean, it's in there.
Yeah.
And that comes to the partners too. I mean, because we are so closely tied to our partners, that means that we are also so deeply tied to the ocean. And it's
Mhm.
just such a gift, and it's such an incredible adventure to explore that and discover that as we move along in our relationships and get more involved in the industry. And speaking with you and other people who are really dedicated to wanting to help fishermen just really means so much, because I could tell that you guys are out there and you want to hear us. It's not just data to collect, to get this grant, to send in a report and then nothing happens, because I've also seen that before, where it's people are collecting data to send in, and I'm like, so then what? They're like, oh, nothing. I'm like, wait, you get grant money to get data and then nothing happens? I'm like, I don't
Right.
understand this. Like,
Right.
what is going on here? Like, you get an A+ for your report and then that's it. Like, it goes into a drawer. So I
Right.
really appreciate everything that you and your team is doing, and all the organizations out there. Thank you for that. Thank you for taking the time to
Thank
do that.
you.
Absolutely. So let me get off the soapbox and want to ask you before we wrap up, do you have any advice for those who are undecided about participating in safety research or mental health programs?
Yeah, I think, especially if it's research based, and even if it's not, everything is voluntary. Give it a shot. If you don't like it, research, program, anything otherwise, then you can leave. You know, you can give it a shot. And again, we talked earlier about how it's not kind of a one size fits all, right? So say maybe somebody wants to talk to a counselor, but they're not sure, I really don't like doing that. And it's not for everybody. But you can give it a shot, and you can go one time and never go back if you didn't get anything out of it. Um, and the same goes for research. I mean, if it's something you're not interested, well within your right to say no, but you can start research studies and you can stop them at any point. They're always voluntary. So I mean, certainly vetting the organizations, asking around, do people know them? And ask as many questions as you want. No good researcher should ever not want questions. Um, if you have concerns about things, bring them up. Absolutely. And again, you can leave at any time, and that's well within your right. And I think that goes for anything in life. If it's not working for you, it's okay to leave. But if you give it a shot, maybe it'll work out great for you.
I love that. And on that note, I've talked about this before and I'm going to talk about it in the future too, but having access to mental health resources, like, and I'm not sponsored by them, but I'm a huge fan of BetterHelp, the app that you
Yes.
can talk to therapists.
Mhm.
It's been so helpful because I can talk to them on my phone. I've literally FaceTimed or face messaged with my therapist while I was in a parking lot. And then my husband recently signed up, was last winter, And he was able to, and you can either do text message, you can do a video FaceTime, or you can do a phone call. And he chose to do a phone call, and he would literally talk to them for an hour or however long he needed or not needed while he was in the parking lot of the harbor. So it was so
Right.
convenient that he could just like, oh, okay, that's my appointment. They were very flexible. And I find that it was super helpful. And also even just one visit to me, I mean, I feel like you gotta have to date your therapist too. Like if this is someone that you're not jamming with, like you could find someone else. It's really easy to do that on that app. But I got so much out of my first session with my therapist that I mean, I felt worlds better. So I feel like even just one therapy session would be super helpful because you do walk away with, I overuse the word tools, but tools to use in the future that I
Yeah,
still use to this day. And so shout out to
definitely.
therapy, mental health all day
Mhm.
long.
Yes.
So is there anything that you'd like to add or anything that we haven't touched on or something that you would like people to take away from our conversation today?
I mean, I think we touched on a lot. I think the biggest takeaway, for fishermen is, you can give it a try and see. You can consult different resources. You can get involved in research. You can always walk away if it's not for you. There are a lot of different um, resources for mental health. Um, there's nothing wrong with anybody that just needs to, have a conversation with somebody, maybe one conversation, maybe multiple conversations. There's no shame in that. Um, Fishermen go through a lot. And I think for partners of fishermen, I think it's kind of trying to advocate for them as much as you can. Um, Fishermen are tired. Fishermen's partners are also tired. They work really hard too. But kind of helping to increase the volume of their voices if they need help doing that. And also, whoever has the most access to these groups coming in to either offer programs, research, whatever it is. I think a lot of people start with fishermen's wives. So kind of just vetting these organizations and making sure that they have your fisherman's best interests in mind like you do, and kind of going on from there.
I love that. And so, how can people learn more about the Northeast Center for Occupational Health and Safety and get involved in one of your programs if they'd like?
So our website is necenter.org, so Northeast Center. So we have a lot of information on there. We have a fishing page, and then we list all of our projects, and you can read more about each of them. So anybody is always welcome to reach out to us at any time. We have our contact info on the website. They can call, they can email, anything like that. We'd be happy to talk to anybody to see if they want to get involved in anything. And we always love feedback as well. Again, we are not fishermen, so any feedback from fishermen, they're the experts in the realm. So we always love to hear from them.
Right. Thank you. I'll put that in the show notes. And it just occurred to me, do you guys have any programs coming up or anything that people may be able to join in the next, I don't know, by the end of 2025 or any, I guess, is there a
So,
rotating list of events too that you guys do?
so we don't have any new projects starting. We're in the middle of a couple right now. But with the changes in NIOSH, the next year's funding is very questionable right now. So we haven't started anything new until we know kind of where that's headed. But we're hoping to kind of have more projects going on. We have one active up down East Maine right now in Stonington. So that one is ongoing. We have a community health worker working up there just to help connect fishermen to resources that they might need. So she's wonderful. So anybody in the Stonington area that is interested in talking to her, please do. And we are working with Fishing Partnership on their PFD project, their life jacket project right now. But otherwise, we have some ideas down the pipeline, but we need to make sure we have secure funding before we can get those moving.
Yeah, that makes sense. And shout out to Stonington. My husband and I went up there, was it 2 summers ago? Oh my God. Stonington is this little gem nugget. If anybody has never gone, it's like, it's the ideal little lobster fishing village to me. And it is so freaking cute. And the people there are so kind. Part of me lives there in my mind. Like I'm constantly, I'm paying rent in Stonington in my mind. I love that little village. It is so
Mhm.
cute.
That's wonderful.
Okay. So we'll all stay tuned. And then the necenter.org is where we can check out everything that's going on with you. And
Yes.
thank you so much again, Mandy, for your time. And
Thank
we so
you.
appreciate you sharing everything that you're doing and just knowing how you guys are really out there making a difference for our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for doing, sorry, we have the lawnmower coming by. I'm not sure if you can hear that.
It's all good. It keeps it real. This is like real life. It's all good.
Zoom is asking, are you playing music?
The lawn music.
Yeah. But thank you for all that you do and advocating for not only fishermen, but the partners of fishermen.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
awesome. So thank
I
you.
appreciate that. Heck yeah. Well, I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you so much for listening. To support our community, I'd so appreciate it if you'd tap the subscribe button to this podcast or write a review. And if you're a POCF who wants to connect further, go to POCFpride.com for weekly vlogs and to learn about opportunities to join our private communities. We'd love to have you.